Strip! Now, Thompson! You think you're above us? Captain Jake Sullivan's fury ripped across Fort Meridian. Dust swirled. Willow Evans stood unflinching. With slow, deliberate grace, her hands rose. The zipper descended. Fabric peeled away. Etched between her shoulder blades, a snarling iron Wolf tattoo materialized. A phantom from shadow. Tension crackled. Every eye fixed on the shocking reveal. Across the platform, General Daniel Sterling froze. His jaw tightened, eyes wide with terrifying recognition. That mark, the sign of Operation Silent Night. A silent word formed on his lips, a word to shatter Sullivan's career and rewrite everything they knew. This is a story about a symbol, truth, and a secret exploding into light. If this mystery grips you, subscribe to Veteran Biker now. Where are you tuning in from? Let us know below. Fort Meridian. The name itself felt like a whisper across the endless Arizona desert, a sprawling complex of tan buildings and training facilities shimmering under the relentless, unforgiving sun. Established in 1943, this base had long since evolved beyond its origins, transforming into one of the military's premier advanced training centers. Here, elite units from every branch came to hone skills that couldn't be learned in conventional programs. This was where exceptional was merely ordinary. From cyber warfare specialists to special operations candidates, Fort Meridian was a crucible designed to forge the best of the best. Yet, into this environment of hypercompetence stepped Willow Evans, and she didn't fit any of their categories. Willow Evans had mastered invisibility. At 30, her unremarkable appearance allowed her to blend effortlessly. Average height, regulation auburn hair, and a face revealing nothing of her past storms. Her standard-issue boots were scuffed from use, her BDUs hung loose, giving the impression of dress-up rather than a veteran. For 5 weeks, she was Fort Meridian's enigma. While others marched in formation, Willow moved with an economical precision, speaking of different training. She remained silent as cadences echoed, observing everything with eyes that catalogued missed details. She arrived at Tuesday morning with paperwork raising more questions than answers. Transfer orders bore obscure Pentagon signatures, stamped with unsettling clearance codes. When pressed, she simply stated her previous assignment was classified, offering a contact number leading to a recorded message for verification. It was a bureaucratic dead end, defying military transparency. From day one, soldiers speculated. During morning PT, while others struggled, Willow completed every obstacle with fluid, effortless precision. She never appeared winded, showed no strain, never celebrated. She simply finished, made notes in a small leather journal, and moved on. Her barracks bunk was Spartan, perfectly organized. She didn't socialize, preferring to sit alone with her journal, writing in small, precise code like script. The mystery only deepened during weapons training. While other soldiers familiarized themselves with standard issue equipment, Willow handled every weapon placed in front of her with the unconscious competence of someone who had moved far beyond familiarity into instinctive mastery. Her shooting scores were perfect. Not good, not exceptional, but mathematically perfect in a way that suggested she wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply demonstrating a baseline level of competence that happened to exceed everyone else's maximum effort. What made the other soldiers most uncomfortable wasn't her skill. The military respected competence above almost everything else. It was her detachment. Willow participated in every exercise, followed every order, completed every task with professional efficiency, but she remained emotionally removed from the experience. She watched them struggle, watched them fail, watched them succeed, and her expression never changed. She was present but not engaged, participating but not invested. The base's training regimen was designed to identify weaknesses and eliminate them through controlled stress. Soldiers were pushed to their breaking points physically, mentally, and emotionally, their responses carefully monitored by instructors who had seen every possible variation of human behavior under pressure. But Willow never reached a breaking point. She adapted to every challenge with the same calm efficiency, as if she were running through exercises she had performed countless times before. Her silence became legendary. While other soldiers bonded over shared misery, complained about unfair treatment, or celebrated small victories, Willow simply observed. She ate her meals alone, never speaking unless directly addressed. And even then, her responses were minimal and professional. Yes, sir. No, sir. Understood. She volunteered no information about herself, asked no questions about others, and showed no interest in forming the relationships that typically developed between soldiers facing shared hardships. But it was her eyes that unnerved people most. They held a depth that suggested experiences beyond anything most soldiers would ever face. When instructors delivered briefings on combat scenarios, Willow listened with the attention of someone reviewing familiar material rather than learning new concepts. When they described the psychological pressures of warfare, she nodded with the understanding of someone who had lived through those pressures rather than simply studied them. The base's rumor mill worked overtime trying to explain Willow Evans. Some speculated she was the daughter of a high-ranking officer, placed in the program as a favor rather than merit. Others suggested she was part of some kind of psychological study, a test subject whose reactions were being monitored by researchers they couldn't see. A few believed she was an undercover investigator sent to identify problems in the training program that needed correction. None of them came close to the truth. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that Willow Evans had once been part of something so classified that its very existence was compartmentalized beyond the highest levels of military command. Operation Silent Night had been a surgical strike mission designed to eliminate a terrorist cell that had acquired weapons-grade plutonium with the intent to construct a dirty bomb. The mission required operatives who could function independently in hostile territory for extended periods, adapting to changing conditions without external support or guidance. 12 soldiers had been selected for Silent Night. Each had been chosen for skills that went beyond conventional military training: psychological resilience, technological expertise, linguistic abilities, and the kind of tactical innovation that couldn't be taught in any classroom. They had trained together for 8 months, developing the intuitive coordination that allowed them to function as a single organism rather than individual soldiers. The mission itself had lasted 6 days. In the end, the terrorist cell was eliminated, the plutonium secured, and the threat neutralized. But only one member of the 12-person team had made it to the extraction point alive. Willow Evans carried the weight of 11 deaths on her shoulders, along with the knowledge that their sacrifice had prevented a catastrophe that could have killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people. She had been debriefed, decorated in ceremonies that would never appear in any public record, and given medical leave to recover from injuries, both physical and psychological. When she was ready to return to active duty, the military faced a unique problem. Willow's skills were too valuable to waste on conventional assignments, but her psychological profile suggested she needed time to process her losses before being placed in another high-stakes situation. The Pentagon's solution: a temporary assignment to Fort Meridian. Here, Willow could maintain readiness while they decided how best to utilize an operative whose capabilities exceeded almost anyone else. So she watched, waited, completing exercises that felt like child's play, surrounded by unaware soldiers. Each evening she journaled, not her own performance but others, noting those who cracked, adapted, showed leadership, or simply followed orders. She assessed the program against Silent Night standards. The irony wasn't lost on her. They questioned her, unaware of her true measures, but she took no satisfaction, knowing perception mattered, choosing unremarkable to avoid uncomfortable questions. Each night in her organized bunk, Willow heard the whispers, speculation, criticism, jokes about her silence. She filed it away emotionlessly. Another day of observation lay ahead. She wondered how long she could balance competence and concealment before forced to reveal who she truly was. The Fort Meridian mess hall buzzed after morning drills. Steam rose, conversations hummed. Willow sat alone at a corner table, methodically eating cardboard-tasting eggs, making notes. She positioned herself for a clear view, a habit from missions where situational awareness meant life or death. From her vantage, she observed social hierarchies, alliances, rivalries, and informal information flow. 3 tables away, Sergeant Grace Miller held court. Miller commanded effortless attention, blonde, confident, her uniform pressed, hair styled, makeup precise despite regulations. Her voice carried easily across the mess hall. "I'm telling you," she said, gesturing with her coffee cup for emphasis, "there's something seriously off about Evans. 5 weeks here and nobody knows anything about her background. That's not normal protocol." The women around her nodded in agreement, drawn into Miller's certainty like metal filings to a magnet. Corporal Sam Davies, a communications specialist with nervous energy that manifested in constant fidgeting, leaned forward conspiratorially. "My friend in admin tried to pull her file yesterday. Half of it's redacted, and the other half requires clearance levels she doesn't have." "Exactly," Miller replied, satisfaction evident in her tone. "Nobody just shows up here with that kind of classified background unless they're hiding something. And look at her." From across the room, Miller's eyes found Willow with predatory precision. She sits alone, never talks to anyone, acts like she's better than the rest of us. But watch her during exercises. She's going through the motions like she's bored or something. That's not dedication, that's arrogance. Private Liam Carter, Sam's younger brother, who had arrived at the base 2 weeks earlier, shook his head in frustration. "It's insulting. Honestly, we've all earned our spots here through years of service, deployments, proving ourselves in the field, and she just shows up with mysterious paperwork and gets treated like she belongs." The conversation was drawing attention from neighboring tables, creating ripples of interest that spread throughout the mess hall like waves from a dropped stone. Soldiers paused their own discussions to listen, their curiosity piqued by the unusual topic of someone who had managed to remain enigmatic in an environment where privacy is nearly impossible to maintain. Captain Jake Sullivan noticed the commotion from his position near the officers' section of the mess hall. At 34, Sullivan carried himself with the aggressive confidence of someone who had risen through the ranks quickly and intended to continue that trajectory. His uniform was immaculate, his posture military perfect, and his expression held the perpetual intensity of someone who viewed every interaction as a potential test of his authority. Sullivan had been watching Willow Evans since her arrival, and what he saw bothered him on multiple levels. Her calm competence during training exercises made other soldiers look inadequate by comparison, which reflected poorly on his ability to maintain unit cohesion. Her mysterious background suggested connections that could potentially supersede his own authority. Most importantly, her presence created questions that he couldn't answer, and Sullivan had built his career on being the person who had all the answers. He approached Miller's table with the measured stride of someone accustomed to having conversations stop when he arrived. The female soldiers immediately straightened, their casual chatter shifting into the more formal demeanor appropriate when addressing a superior officer. "Sergeant Miller," Sullivan said, his voice pitched to carry beyond their immediate group. I couldn't help but overhear your concerns about Soldier Evans. Perhaps you'd like to share your observations with someone who might be able to address them." Miller's eyes lit up with the satisfaction of someone whose complaints were finally being taken seriously by someone with the authority to act on them.
"Sir, it's not just me. Multiple soldiers have expressed concerns about Evans's presence here."
Her attitude seems inconsistent with the collaborative environment we're trying to maintain. Sullivan nodded thoughtfully, playing the role of the concerned commanding officer, weighing the welfare of his unit. "What specific behaviors have you observed that concern you?" "She doesn't participate in group activities, sir. Doesn't engage in the team-building exercises that are supposed to create unit cohesion. During downtime, she isolates herself instead of bonding with fellow soldiers. And during training, she performs exercises with what appears to be minimal effort while still achieving results that make others look inadequate." Corporal Nathan Phillips, a stocky soldier with arms covered in military tattoos, had drifted over from a nearby table.
"Sir, if I may add something, Evans's performance suggests she's not being challenged by our training regimen."
"That either means she's not being pushed hard enough or she doesn't take the training seriously. And there's the question of her background," added Private Tyler Kim, a young soldier whose eagerness to prove himself often led to overstatements. "None of us know what qualifies her for this program. That lack of transparency creates distrust among the ranks." Sullivan absorbed their complaints with the expression of someone carefully considering multiple perspectives. In reality, he was calculating the political advantage of addressing a problem that was already generating discussion among the soldiers. Taking action against Evans would demonstrate his willingness to maintain standards regardless of whatever connections she might have. It would also eliminate a source of uncertainty that had been bothering him since her arrival. "Your concerns are noted," Sullivan said, with the gravity of someone making an important decision. "Unit cohesion is essential for mission success, and any factor that undermines that cohesion needs to be addressed promptly and decisively." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle over the expanding group of listeners. "I'll be conducting a comprehensive evaluation of all personnel to ensure everyone meets the standards expected at this facility. That includes assessment of both skill and attitude." The soldiers around him nodded approvingly, satisfied that their complaints were being taken seriously by someone with the authority to implement solutions. Sullivan had successfully positioned himself as the decisive leader, addressing legitimate concerns rather than someone looking for an excuse to target a soldier whose presence made him uncomfortable. Willow continued eating her breakfast, apparently oblivious to the conversation happening 3 tables away. But her training had taught her to process multiple conversations simultaneously while maintaining the appearance of disinterest. She heard every word, catalogued every speaker, and noted the way Sullivan was using legitimate command concerns to mask what appeared to be a personal agenda. She had encountered officers like Sullivan before, competent enough to advance through standard military hierarchies, but lacking the intuitive leadership skills required for situations where protocols didn't provide clear guidance. Such officers typically compensated for their limitations by adhering rigidly to regulations and viewing any deviation from standard procedures as a threat to their authority. The problem was that Willow's very existence represented a deviation from standard procedures. Her background couldn't be explained through normal channels. Her skills exceeded the baseline expectations for soldiers at her apparent rank, and her behavior didn't conform to the social dynamics that Sullivan understood and felt comfortable managing. As she finished her meal and prepared to leave for morning training exercises, Willow recognized the signs of escalating tension that preceded most conflicts. Sullivan had positioned himself as the protector of unit standards. Miller had established herself as the voice of legitimate soldier concerns, and the growing group of supporters had created an audience that would expect some form of resolution. The careful balance she had maintained for 5 weeks was beginning to shift. And Willow understood that the time for passive observation might be coming to an end. Soon, very soon, someone would push hard enough to force her to respond with something more than silent competence. She closed her journal, secured it in her cargo pocket, and walked toward the exit with the same economical movements that had characterized her presence since arrival. Behind her, the conversation continued to grow, drawing more soldiers into speculation about the mysterious woman who had somehow earned a place among them without earning their understanding. The morning sun was already promising another day of brutal Arizona heat, and Willow sensed that today would test more than just physical endurance. Today felt like the day when questions would demand answers, and answers would change everything. The weapons maintenance facility at Fort Meridian pulsed with organized chaos. It was a symphony of methodical clangs and the metallic scent of gun oil, a place that would overwhelm any civilian observer but felt like home to career soldiers. Rows of disassembled rifles lay on metal tables like intricate mechanical puzzles, their components sorted with military precision into labeled containers. The air smelled of gun oil and metal cleaner, punctuated by the rhythmic sounds of focused work, each soldier acutely aware their life might one day depend on the reliability of the weapon in their hands. Willow Evans occupied a corner workstation. Her movements were so fluid they appeared choreographed as she systematically cleaned and reassembled an M4 carbine. Her hands moved independently of conscious thought, muscle memory guiding her through procedures performed thousands of times under conditions ranging from comfortable workshops to muddy foxholes in hostile territory. Each component was inspected, cleaned, and replaced with thorough attention, separating professionals from amateurs. What distinguished Willow's work wasn't merely speed, though she completed tasks faster than most, but the unconscious competence marking someone far beyond basic proficiency. She didn't need to think about proper trigger assembly or bolt carrier maintenance any more than she needed to think about breathing. Her fingers found worn spots indicating potential failure points, detected minor imperfections that could cause malfunctions, and made adjustments with the precision of someone whose survival had once depended on such minute details. Other soldiers had grown accustomed to stealing glances at her workstation, partly from professional curiosity and partly from the uncomfortable recognition that they were witnessing expertise that made their own skills seem elementary. Willow never acknowledged their attention, never offered advice or criticism, never engaged in casual conversations. Instead, she maintained the same detached focus characterizing all her activities at Fort Meridian. When she encountered a complex maintenance issue, she solved it without fanfare or explanation. When others struggled with procedures she could complete in her sleep, she continued working on her own equipment without offering assistance. Her silence wasn't hostile or dismissive, it was simply complete, as if she existed in a parallel space that occasionally intersected with theirs but never fully merged. Private Liam Carter worked at the station adjacent to Willow's. He struggled with a stubborn bolt assembly that refused to seat properly despite repeated attempts. His frustration was evident in the increasingly aggressive way he handled the components, movements jerky and impatient, as the mechanism continued to resist his efforts. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning, and his breathing had taken on the shallow quality indicating rising stress levels. Willow watched Carter struggle through her peripheral vision while continuing her own work with uninterrupted efficiency. She could see the problem immediately, a minor warping preventing proper alignment. She could have solved it in 30 seconds with the right technique, but offering help would require breaking the careful social distance she had maintained for 5 weeks. Willow wasn't ready to abandon that strategic position over an issue Carter would eventually solve through persistence, if not immediate skill. What she didn't anticipate was how her apparent indifference would be interpreted by soldiers already predisposed to suspicion. "You know," Carter said, his voice pitched loudly enough to carry beyond their immediate area, "most soldiers would offer to help when they see a fellow service member struggling with equipment maintenance." Willow's hands never paused. Her expression never changed and her eyes never shifted from the weapon components. She simply continued reassembling her rifle with the same steady precision. Carter's comment drew attention from neighboring workstations, creating an audience for what was clearly intended as a public challenge to Willow's behavior. Soldiers paused their own work, sensing potential conflict with the instinctive awareness military personnel developed for social tensions. Corporal Nathan Phillips looked up from his workstation with the expression of someone who had been waiting for exactly this opportunity. "That's what I've been talking about," he said, his voice carrying satisfaction. "Zero team spirit, zero interest in helping fellow soldiers succeed." The criticism struck a nerve with several soldiers struggling with various aspects of the advanced training program. Willow's consistent competence made their own difficulties feel more pronounced, and her refusal to offer guidance or encouragement created the impression that she considered herself above such concerns. Sergeant Grace Miller emerged from the Armory office. Her timing was perfect. Perhaps she had been monitoring the situation. "This is exactly what I was discussing with Captain Sullivan," Miller announced, her voice carrying authority. "We're supposed to be building unit cohesion through shared challenges and mutual support. But how can we function as a team when some members refuse to participate in the collaborative aspects of military service?" Willow finally looked up from her workstation, her eyes tracking from Carter to Phillips to Miller with methodical assessment, cataloging threats rather than engaging. The silence stretched uncomfortably as soldiers waited for her to defend herself, explain, or at least acknowledge their criticisms. Instead, Willow set down her cleaning tools with the same precise movements and reached for the small notebook in her cargo pocket. She opened it to dense handwriting and began making notes, her pen moving steadily as if the conversation was merely information to be documented. The gesture was so dismissive, so completely indifferent, that it sparked something deeper than frustration. This wasn't just antisocial behavior, it was active contempt for their concerns, their authority, their very presence.
"Are you seriously taking notes right now?"
Carter asked, his voice rising in incredulity. "We're trying to have a conversation about unit dynamics and you're treating it like some kind of research project." Willow continued writing without looking up. Her handwriting maintained the same small, precise characters. Whatever she was documenting required careful attention as she made several corrections and additions before closing the notebook. When she resumed work on her rifle, her movements carried the same fluid competence they always had, as if the entire confrontation had been nothing more than background noise. The message was clear. Their opinions didn't matter to her. Their criticism carried no weight, and their presence was barely worth noticing. Miller's face flushed with anger, the kind that came from being ignored rather than opposed. Soldiers could handle disagreement, argument, even direct confrontation, but being dismissed as irrelevant struck at the core of military identity, built on the principle that every service member mattered and deserved respect. "This ends today," Miller said, her voice carrying finality. "I'm documenting this behavior and forwarding it through proper channels. Captain Sullivan needs to know that we have a soldier who refuses to function as part of a team." Phillips nodded approvingly. Someone needs to explain to Evans that military service isn't a solo career path. We succeed or fail together, and anyone who can't understand that doesn't belong here.
The facility quieted as soldiers paused, observing Willow.
Her silence became a vacuum, filled by escalating criticisms. She continued working, processing the social dynamics. Hostile interrogations and isolated weeks meant frustrated soldiers were barely a stressor. Her concern lay not in their anger, but its formal channeling towards officers eager to assert authority. Willow recognized official military discipline looming. Her 5-week balance was collapsing. She faced a choice: maintain cover or defend herself with revelations. Finishing her rifle's inspection, she considered the irony. These soldiers, untested by life or death decisions, would soon learn who Willow Evans truly was, and why her silence had been a kindness. The Fort Meridian morning briefing room buzzed with nervous energy. Captain Jake Sullivan stood front, clipboard in hand, commanding. A screen behind him read, "Performance Assessment. All personnel." Willow entered with economical motion, taking a back seat, journal ready. The room felt charged, purposeful. A storm was building. Sergeant Grace Miller positioned herself in the third row, surrounded by supporters. Their whispers and glances confirmed their campaign. Miller's body language radiated satisfaction. Sullivan called the room to attention. 200 soldiers snapped to their feet, then settled into absolute silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sullivan began, measured and rehearsed, "this facility prepares elite soldiers. It requires individual excellence and effective team function." He paused. Over past weeks, concerns about unit cohesion and collaborative spirit have been raised through proper channels. They require immediate address. Willow's pen moved steadily across her journal, documenting not just Sullivan's words but the reactions. She noted how soldiers shifted uncomfortably or nodded approvingly, and how Miller's group exchanged satisfied glances. What interested Willow most was Sullivan's body language. Slight tension in his shoulders, eyes avoiding certain sections, careful precision of his word choices, indicating he was following a script, not speaking from personal conviction. This wasn't a commander addressing legitimate training concerns. This was an officer maneuvered into taking action, serving someone else's agenda. Military service, Sullivan continued, his voice gaining strength, is fundamentally about sacrifice. Not just the willingness to sacrifice your life for your country, but the daily sacrifice of individual preferences for the greater good of the unit. Soldiers who cannot or will not make that sacrifice represent a threat to mission success and the safety of their fellow service members. The room remained silent, but Willow sensed shifting energy as soldiers understood this briefing wasn't theoretical. Someone specific was being targeted. Sullivan's eyes swept the room with practiced authority, making eye contact before finally settling on Willow's position. Today's evaluation will test not only individual competence, but also the willingness to demonstrate the collaborative spirit that separates true soldiers from individuals who happen to wear uniforms. The words hung like a challenge. Willow understood the careful neutrality she had maintained for 5 weeks was about to be tested. Sullivan wasn't just announcing a training exercise, he was setting the stage for a confrontation determining whether she could continue operating under the radar or be forced to reveal capabilities, raising uncomfortable questions. Behind Sullivan, the screen flickered to life, revealing a detailed training scenario. The exercise involved a simulated hostage rescue operation in an urban environment, complete with multiple entry points, civilian complications, and time constraints. Teams of 4 soldiers would be assigned randomly, given 30 minutes to develop tactical plans, and then evaluated on both strategy quality and cohesive function during planning. Team assignments are posted on the board outside, Sullivan announced, gesturing. You have exactly 30 minutes to develop your approach before presenting to the evaluation panel. Your success will be measured not only on tactical soundness, but on your ability to incorporate input from all team members and demonstrate collaborative decision-making. Willow closed her journal and secured it. The time for passive observation was ending. The evaluation was clearly designed to test her willingness to engage in collaborative planning. Sullivan and Miller had maneuvered her into a situation where continued isolation would be interpreted as evidence of antisocial behavior. As soldiers filed out, Willow caught fragments of conversations confirming her assessment. "Finally going to see what Evans is really made of," someone whispered. "About time someone tested whether she can actually work with a team," another added. Anticipation was palpable. Soldiers, frustrated by her competence, were eager to see her forced into conventional military cooperation. Willow approached the assignment board with measured stride. Internally, she calculated options with rapid-fire analysis. She could participate fully, demonstrating collaboration while appearing to learn. Or she could continue minimal engagement, accepting consequences but preserving anonymity. The third option, most worrying, was that the exercise might force her to reveal tactical knowledge far beyond her apparent level. Urban hostage rescue operations were exactly what Operation Silent Night operatives trained for extensively, and Willow's expertise in such scenarios was both comprehensive and impossible to disguise if she chose to apply it fully. Her name appeared on the board alongside 3 other soldiers: Corporal Nathan Phillips, Private Tyler Kim, and Specialist Eliza Vance. The composition wasn't random. It was a carefully constructed test, pairing her with 3 of the soldiers who had been most vocal in their criticism of her behavior. Phillips and Kim had confronted her during weapons maintenance. Vance had been part of Miller's group during several mess hall conversations about Willow's unsuitability for the program. Willow studied the names with professional detachment. Sullivan had created a scenario maximizing tension while providing clear metrics for evaluating her response to adversarial team dynamics. Failing to contribute would confirm unwillingness to collaborate. Dominating would suggest arrogance. Demonstrating exceeding knowledge would unravel her cover. As she walked toward the designated planning area where her team was already gathering, Willow realized 5 weeks of careful neutrality had led inevitably to this moment of forced choice. The storm building since her arrival was about to break. She had to decide whether to weather it as Willow Evans, the mysterious soldier, or as someone else entirely, someone whose existence would change everything the people around her thought they understood about military capability and the true nature of the threats their country faced. The next 30 minutes would determine not just her future, but whether the secret she had carried for 3 years would finally be exposed to. People who had no idea they were about to witness the tactical expertise of someone who had already proven herself in ways they could barely imagine. The main training field at Fort Meridian stretched across several acres of desert sand, its perimeter marked by equipment sheds and observation towers that cast long shadows in the afternoon sun. Captain Jake Sullivan had positioned himself at a raised platform overlooking the exercise area, flanked by a panel of senior instructors whose clipboards and stopwatches indicated they were prepared to evaluate every aspect of the upcoming tactical demonstrations. Behind them, nearly 300 soldiers had gathered to observe the hostage rescue scenarios, their conversations creating a steady buzz of anticipation that suggested word had spread about the true purpose of today's evaluation. Willow Evans' team approached their designated starting position with the kind of tense energy that preceded most conflicts. The planning session had concluded without resolution, leaving them with a compromise strategy that satisfied no one and incorporated tactical elements that Willow knew were fundamentally flawed. Corporal Nathan Phillips had insisted on maintaining command authority despite the growing evidence that his approach to urban warfare was dangerously outdated. Meanwhile, Specialist Eliza Vance and Private Liam Carter had aligned themselves with different aspects of Willow's suggestions without fully understanding their strategic implications. The result was a tactical plan that attempted to combine aggressive frontal assault with coordinated multiple entry points, creating a hybrid approach that maximized risk while minimizing the advantages that either strategy might have offered independently. Willow had tried to explain the contradictions inherent in their compromise, but Phillips had dismissed her concerns as theoretical, overthinking that would paralyze them during execution. Sullivan's voice carried across the training field through speakers mounted on the observation towers, his words reaching every soldier gathered to witness the evaluation. Team 4, you are cleared to begin your tactical demonstration. You have 12 minutes to complete the hostage rescue scenario using the strategy developed during your planning session. Your performance will be evaluated on tactical soundness, execution efficiency, and collaborative effectiveness. The mock building that served as their target was a 3-story concrete structure designed to simulate urban residential complexes where terrorist organizations frequently established operational bases. Windows had been equipped with sensors that would register simulated weapon fire, while motion detectors throughout the interior would track team movements and measure response times to various tactical developments. Automated systems would introduce complications during the exercise, sudden changes in hostage locations, additional hostile forces, equipment failures that would test the team's ability to adapt under pressure. Willow studied the building with professional assessment, her eyes automatically cataloging structural features that would affect tactical options, load-bearing walls that couldn't be breached safely, sight lines that would expose assault teams to defensive fire, and architectural elements that could provide either cover or concealment depending on how they were utilized. Her training with Operation Silent Night had involved extensive practice in similar facilities, and she could see immediately that the compromise strategy they had developed would encounter problems within the first 3 minutes of execution. Phillips positioned himself at the primary breach point, checking his equipment with the focused intensity of someone determined to prove his leadership capabilities through decisive action. His M4 carbine was configured for close-quarters combat, equipped with tactical lights and laser sights that would provide advantages in the building's darkened interior. Carter flanked him at the secondary entry point, his nervous energy now channeled into hyper-vigilant attention to detail as he prepared for what he clearly viewed as a test of his worthiness for continued participation in the advanced training program. Vance had taken position at the communications station where she would coordinate team movements and relay information about tactical developments as they emerged during the exercise. Her equipment included radio systems, building monitoring displays, and direct communication links to the evaluation panel that would allow real-time assessment of decision-making processes under stress. Willow found herself assigned to an overwatch position on a nearby building, equipped with a designated marksman rifle and tasked with providing covering fire for the assault teams while identifying threats that might emerge from unexpected directions. The position was strategically sound but tactically limiting. She would be able to observe the entire operation but unable to directly influence its execution when problems inevitably developed. As the countdown timer reached its final seconds, Willow recognized that she was about to witness a tactical disaster that would likely result in simulated casualties among both hostages and assault team members. The compromise strategy they had developed contained fundamental flaws that would become apparent as soon as they attempted implementation, but her warnings had been dismissed as theoretical concerns that didn't apply to practical military operations. The exercise began with Phillips initiating initiating his frontal assault exactly as planned, his approach confident and aggressive as he breached the primary entrance with textbook precision. Carter simultaneously entered through the secondary access point, his movements coordinated with Phillips through radio communication that Vance monitored from her command position. For the first 60 seconds, their execution appeared flawless. A textbook demonstration of military competence that drew approving nods from the evaluation panel. Then the complications began. Automated systems introduced the first tactical variable, additional hostile forces positioned in locations that hadn't been anticipated during planning. Phillips found himself pinned down in the main corridor by defensive fire from multiple directions, while Carter discovered that his assigned route was blocked by structural debris that required immediate tactical adaptation. Vance attempted to coordinate their responses from her communication station, but the rapid changes and tactical circumstances exceeded their planning assumptions. Willow watched the developing crisis through her rifle scope, recognizing each problem as it emerged and calculating solutions with the rapid-fire analysis that had kept Operation Silent Night operatives alive during actual combat operations. She could see exactly what needed to happen. Phillips needed to withdraw from his exposed position and approach from a different vector. Carter needed to bypass the blocked route using alternative access points that existed but hadn't been identified during planning, and Vance needed to redirect their coordination based on real-time tactical intelligence rather than predetermined assumptions. But providing that guidance would require revealing knowledge that went far beyond what any soldier at her apparent level should possess. Through her radio headset, Willow could hear the growing frustration in her teammates' voices as they struggled to adapt their compromised strategy to tactical realities that were overwhelming their planning assumptions. Phillips was requesting backup that didn't exist. Carter was asking for routing guidance that Vance couldn't provide, and Vance was trying to coordinate responses to situations that exceeded her training and tactical command. The timer showed 8 minutes remaining, but Willow could see that their current approach would result in mission failure within the next 2 minutes, unless someone provided tactical guidance that salvaged their deteriorating position. She keyed her radio with the calm professionalism that had characterized her communication style since arriving at Fort Meridian. Overwatch to assault teams. Recommend immediate tactical adjustment based on current hostile positions. Phillips's response crackled through her headset with barely controlled anger. Negative. Overwatch. Maintain position and provide covering fire as assigned. We've got this handled, but they didn't have it handled, and Willow could see their tactical situation deteriorating with each passing second. In 90 seconds, the automated systems would introduce additional complications that would turn their current difficulties into complete mission failure. Simulated hostages would be declared dead. Assault team members would be marked as casualties, and their performance evaluation would reflect tactical incompetence that could affect their military careers. Willow faced the choice she had been avoiding for 5 weeks. Watch her teammates fail because of tactical decisions she knew were wrong, or reveal enough expertise to guide them towards success while risking exposure of capabilities that would raise uncomfortable questions about her background. Her eyes, sharp as a predator's, tracked movement within the mock building as Phillips attempted to advance through a corridor that Willow knew was a tactical trap. In 30 seconds, he would be in a position where defensive fire would simulate fatal wounds unless someone warned him about the threat he couldn't see. Willow's finger hovered over her radio transmission key. She realized that 5 weeks of careful anonymity were about to end with a single decision that would change everything the people around her thought they understood about military competence and the true nature of the soldier who had been hiding among them. The next 30 seconds unfolded with the kind of clarity that Willow had experienced during actual combat operations, where time seemed to slow, and every detail became hyper-focused while her mind processed tactical information at speeds that exceeded conscious thought. Through her rifle scope, she watched Phillips advance into the corridor trap with the confident stride of someone who believed his military training had prepared him for any situation he might encounter. But Willow could see what Phillips couldn't. Motion sensors had detected movement in adjacent rooms that indicated hostile forces positioning themselves for a coordinated ambush. In 15 seconds, Phillips would reach the intersection where multiple firing angles would converge on his position. The automated training system would register simulated wounds that would remove him from the exercise while marking his tactical approach as fatally flawed. Vance's voice crackled through the radio with growing urgency as she monitored the building sensor systems from her command position. "Phillips, I'm reading multiple contacts in your vicinity. Recommend you hold position while we assess the tactical situation." Phillips's response carried the aggressive certainty of someone who had committed to a course of action and refused to acknowledge complications that might require adaptation. "Negative. We're moving forward according to plan. Carter, maintain your advance through the secondary corridor and prepare to converge on the target area." Willow's training with Operation Silent Night had included extensive practice in making split-second decisions under pressure when the lives of team members depended on immediate action. She had learned to calculate risk factors, tactical alternatives, and probable outcomes in the compressed timeframes that characterized combat operations where hesitation meant death. The current situation wasn't life or death, but the principles remained the same. Someone with superior tactical knowledge faced the choice of watching preventable failure occur or intervening with expertise that would raise uncomfortable questions. She keyed her radio transmission with the calm authority that had once coordinated operations across multiple continents under conditions where mission success determined national security outcomes. "All units, halt advance immediately. Phillips, you have hostile forces positioned at bearing 270 and 315 degrees from your current position. Carter, your route is compromised. You need to adjust to alternative access point Charlie 3. The certainty in Willow's voice carried weight that went beyond normal military communication protocols. This wasn't a suggestion or recommendation. It was tactical intelligence delivered with the precision of someone who could see patterns that others missed and calculate solutions that others couldn't imagine. Phillips stopped his advance, his confusion evident in the sudden silence that followed Willow's transmission. Through her scope, she could see him checking his position against the building schematic while trying to understand how an Overwatch position could provide detailed intelligence about interior tactical developments. "Evans, how do you have visibility on interior hostile positions from your current location?" Vance asked, her professional curiosity overriding protocol as she tried to understand tactical information that exceeded the capabilities of standard Overwatch procedures. Willow realized that any detailed explanation would reveal reconnaissance techniques that went far beyond conventional military training. But Phillips was still positioned in the kill zone, and Carter was approaching a corridor that would expose him to concentrated defensive fire within the next minute. "Structural analysis combined with sensor pattern recognition," Willow replied, hoping that technical explanation would satisfy immediate questions while providing the tactical guidance they needed. "Phillips, move to cover position at the northeast stairwell and approach the target area from above. Carter, bypass the blocked corridor and use the maintenance access on the building's west side." Her instructions were delivered with military precision, but they revealed knowledge of the building's internal layout that went beyond what anyone should have possessed based on the limited schematics provided during planning. Willow was drawing on experience with similar structures during actual operations. unconsciously applying tactical knowledge that she had gained through missions that officially didn't exist. Phillips began moving toward the position Willow had identified, his confusion about her intelligence sources overridden by recognition that her tactical assessment was proving accurate. The hostile forces that had been preparing to ambush his original route were indeed positioned exactly where she had indicated, and the alternative approach she suggested would avoid their prepared defensive positions. Carter adjusted his route according to Willow's guidance, discovering that the maintenance access she had identified provided exactly the kind of concealed approach that their compromise strategy had failed to incorporate. His movement through the alternative route was swift and efficient, demonstrating the kind of tactical adaptation that separated competent soldiers from exceptional ones. From her command position, Vance monitored their progress with professional appreciation for tactical coordination that exceeded anything she had witnessed during previous training exercises. All units, we have successful tactical repositioning based on Overwatch intelligence. Phillips and Carter are in position for coordinated final assault on target area. The timer showed 4 minutes remaining, and their tactical situation had been transformed from impending failure into probable success through Willow's guidance. But the cost of that success was the exposure of expertise that raised fundamental questions about her background, training, and the true nature of her assignment to Fort Meridian. Captain Jake Sullivan's voice echoed across the training field through the speaker system, carrying authority that suggested he was prepared to address the situation that was developing beyond his original evaluation parameters. Team 4, halt exercise. All personnel report to the evaluation platform immediately for tactical debrief. Willow understood that the careful anonymity she had maintained for 5 weeks was about to be subjected to scrutiny that would either expose her true identity or force her to provide explanations that were impossible to reconcile with her official background. The mask she had worn since arriving at Fort Meridian was beginning to slip, and she wasn't certain she could prevent it from falling away completely. As she secured her equipment and prepared to descend from her Overwatch position, Willow realized that the storm she had been anticipating was finally breaking over Fort Meridian with a force that would change everything. The quiet soldier who had been dismissed as antisocial and unqualified was about to face questions that would determine whether she could continue operating under the protective cover of anonymity or whether the truth about Operation Silent Night would finally emerge from the shadows where it had been hidden for 3 years. The next few minutes would determine not just her future at the base, but whether the most classified military operation in recent history would be exposed to people who had no security clearance to know it had ever existed. The evaluation platform at Fort Meridian commanded a view of the entire training complex, its elevated position allowing instructors to observe multiple exercises simultaneously while maintaining communication with field commanders across the base. Captain Jake Sullivan stood at the center of the platform with the rigid posture of someone who had encountered a situation that challenged. His understanding of military protocol, his clipboard forgotten as he focused entirely on the 4 soldiers approaching from the exercise area. Behind Sullivan, the panel of senior instructors exhibited the kind of professional curiosity that emerged when routine evaluations produced unexpected results. Sergeant Major Evelyn Stone, a 30-year veteran whose experience included deployments to every major conflict zone of the past 3 decades, studied Willow Evans with the assessment skills that came from evaluating thousands of soldiers under stress. Lieutenant Colonel Richard Thorne, the base's tactical training coordinator, reviewed digital recordings of the exercise with the focused attention of someone trying to understand how a failed mission had been transformed into textbook execution through the intervention of a soldier whose capabilities exceeded all reasonable expectations. Willow approached the platform with the same measured stride that had characterized her movement since arriving at Fort Meridian. But internally, she was calculating responses to questions that would inevitably probe beyond the surface explanations she had prepared for this moment. Her teammates flanked her with expressions that ranged from confusion to professional respect, their previous hostility replaced by uncertainty about what they had witnessed during the tactical exercise. Corporal Nathan Phillips looked like someone who had been forced to confront the limitations of his own expertise, while recognizing superior knowledge in someone he had dismissed as incompetent. His confidence had been shaken by the realization that Willow's tactical guidance had prevented what would have been a comprehensive mission failure, and his usual aggressive demeanor had been replaced by the cautious respect that soldiers showed when they encountered capabilities they didn't understand. Private Liam Carter's nervous energy had evolved into something approaching awe as he processed the tactical sophistication Willow had demonstrated during their coordination, the precision of her intelligence, the accuracy of her route recommendations, and the strategic thinking that had salvaged their compromised mission suggested military experience that went far beyond anything he had imagined possible for someone at her apparent rank. Specialist Eliza Vance carried herself with the professional assessment skills of someone trained to analyze communication patterns and information flow under stress. Her expertise in tactical coordination allowed her to recognize that Willow's guidance had exhibited qualities characteristic of Special Operations Command rather than standard military training. Her expression suggested she was drawing conclusions that raised uncomfortable questions about Willow's true background. Sullivan initiated the debrief with the authoritative tone he used when addressing situations requiring immediate clarification. Team 4, your exercise demonstrated remarkable tactical adaptation that resulted in mission success despite initial strategic difficulties. However, the source of that adaptation requires explanation. He paused, his attention focusing specifically on Willow with the intensity of someone who suspected he was dealing with circumstances that exceeded his normal administrative authority. Soldier Evans, your tactical guidance during the exercise exhibited knowledge that appears inconsistent with your background and training records. Please explain how you were able to provide detailed intelligence about interior hostile positions from an exterior Overwatch location. Willow had anticipated this question since the moment she decided to intervene, and she had prepared responses that might satisfy immediate curiosity without revealing information that would compromise operational security. But the directness of Sullivan's inquiry made it clear that simple explanations would not be sufficient. Sir, I utilized structural analysis combined with pattern recognition based on sensor feedback and tactical probability assessment, Willow replied, her voice maintaining the neutral professionalism that had frustrated interrogators during previous debriefs. The building's design created predictable defensive positions that could be identified through systematic observation. Sergeant Major Stone stepped forward with the kind of movement that suggested she was prepared to probe beyond surface explanations. Her experience with special operations personnel had taught her to recognize the linguistic patterns that characterize soldiers trained to deflect questions about classified activities. Soldier Evans, Stone said, her voice carrying authority that came from 3 decades of evaluating military personnel under conditions that revealed their true capabilities. Your tactical guidance exhibited familiarity with advanced reconnaissance techniques and urban warfare strategies that exceed standard training protocols. Where did you acquire that expertise? The question was more sophisticated than Sullivan's initial inquiry, demonstrating understanding that Willow's performance couldn't be explained through conventional military education. Stone was probing for information about specialized training that would account for capabilities that suggested experience with classified operations. Willow recognized that continued deflection would only intensify scrutiny while failing to provide explanations that satisfied legitimate command concerns about her background, but revealing information about Operation Silent Night would violate security protocols designed to protect both operational methods and the families of personnel whose service records remained classified for national security reasons. Ma'am, my previous assignments included training scenarios that emphasized tactical problem-solving under stress, Willow replied, hoping vague references to unspecified training would satisfy immediate questions without providing details that would compromise security protocols. Lieutenant Colonel Thorne approached the questioning from a different angle, his expertise in tactical training allowing him to recognize specific techniques Willow had employed during the exercise. Evans, your route recommendations demonstrated knowledge of building layouts that exceeded the schematic information provided during planning. That suggests either prior familiarity with this specific facility or training in rapid structural assessment that goes beyond standard military instruction. The observation was accurate and dangerous, because it indicated that Thorne possessed enough tactical knowledge to recognize the sophisticated nature of Willow's performance. His question wasn't based on suspicion or curiosity. It was based on professional assessment that identified capabilities which required explanation. Willow's teammates listened to the interrogation with growing awareness that they had been working alongside someone whose military background was far more complex than any of them had imagined. Phillips showed particular interest in the line of questioning, recognizing that Willow's tactical expertise had exceeded his own despite years of conventional military training that he had considered comprehensive. Sullivan, feeling his authority challenged, asserted himself once more. Evans, I'm ordering you to provide a detailed explanation of your tactical training background. Your performance during this exercise suggests capabilities that are inconsistent with your personnel records, and that inconsistency requires immediate resolution. The direct order created a situation Willow had hoped to avoid, a formal military command requiring a response that would compromise security protocols protecting classified operations. She could refuse and face disciplinary action, or she could provide explanations that might expose missions that officially didn't exist. Willow stood at attention, her perfect military bearing drilled into her during training far beyond anything her interrogators had experienced. Her eyes focused on a point beyond Sullivan's shoulder as she calculated a response that might satisfy immediate command concerns without violating the security protocols that had kept Operation Silent Night operatives alive where exposure meant death. Sir, Willow said finally, her voice carrying a quality that suggested she was prepared to provide information that would change the nature of their conversation entirely. My tactical background includes training that requires security clearance verification before details can be discussed in this setting. The response was both acknowledgement and warning. Confirmation that Willow possessed classified military experience while indicating that further inquiry would need to follow protocols designed for handling sensitive information. Sullivan found himself facing a situation that exceeded his administrative authority, potentially involving security classifications beyond his clearance level. The interrogation had reached a critical point where continued questioning would either expose classified information or force Willow to refuse direct orders from superior officers. The storm that had been building since her arrival at Fort Meridian was about to break, with consequences extending far beyond the routine evaluations Sullivan had planned to demonstrate his authority. What happened next would determine whether Willow could maintain the protective anonymity that had concealed her true identity, or whether the truth about Operation Silent Night would finally emerge from the shadows where it had been hidden for 3 years. Willow reached for the zipper of her uniform top with movements that appeared calm and professional, despite the recognition that her decision would change everything. The metal teeth separated with a soft sound that seemed impossibly loud in the desert silence, while hundreds of soldiers watched a confrontation none of them fully understood, but all recognized as significant. As the fabric fell away to reveal the plain olive tank top underneath, Willow could sense the shift in energy across the training field. Sullivan leaned forward with the satisfaction of someone whose aggressive approach was finally producing results, while the instructors watched with professional concern for a situation that had escalated beyond their comfort level. Willow turned slightly to adjust her position in the desert heat, and that movement revealed what had been hidden beneath her uniform for 5 weeks. A tattoo between her shoulder blades that made Sergeant Major Stone take a sharp breath and caused Lieutenant Colonel Thorne to step forward with sudden recognition. The Iron Wolf insignia emerged into view like a ghost materializing from shadow. A snarling wolf's head surrounded by crossed lightning bolts and 7 stars, arranged in a pattern that looked random to most observers, but carried specific meaning for anyone with knowledge of classified special operations. The artwork was intricate and professional, but more importantly, it was a symbol that identified membership in units that officially didn't exist. Sullivan's satisfaction vanished as he recognized that his aggressive approach to resolving Willow's mysterious background had uncovered information that exceeded his clearance level and potentially his authority to handle. The Iron Wolf wasn't just a military tattoo. It was identification of participation in operations that were classified beyond normal military security protocols. The storm that had been building since Willow's arrival at Fort Meridian finally broke over the training field with a force that would change everything the people witnessing it thought they understood about military capability and the true nature of national defense operations that remained hidden from public knowledge. The silence that followed the revelation of Willow's tattoo was absolute, the kind of profound quiet that occurs when reality shifts so dramatically that everyone present requires time to process what they're witnessing. Lieutenant Colonel Thorne stood frozen at the edge of the evaluation platform, his tablet forgotten in hands that had gone slack with recognition. The Iron Wolf insignia wasn't just familiar to him, it was a symbol he had encountered in classified briefings that carried security restrictions he had never expected to see manifested on a soldier standing in front of him. Sergeant Major Stone moved with the careful precision of someone approaching something dangerous and unpredictable. Her 30 years of military experience included exposure to special operations that existed in the shadows of conventional military structure, and the Iron Wolf tattoo represented participation in missions compartmentalized beyond normal security classifications. Her eyes tracked from the tattoo to Willow's face with the kind of professional assessment that came from recognizing capabilities she had heard described, but never witnessed directly. Captain Sullivan's expression cycled through confusion, recognition, and dawning horror as he began to understand the implications of what his aggressive confrontation had uncovered. The Iron Wolf wasn't a standard military insignia that could be explained through conventional service records. It identified participation in operations so classified that their existence was barely acknowledged by Pentagon officials who possessed clearance levels exceeding his own administrative authority. Willow remained motionless at the center of the platform. Her tank top clung to her skin in the desert heat, while hundreds of soldiers stared at artwork that most of them didn't recognize, but all understood was significant. The tattoo was beautiful and intricate, but its meaning went far beyond aesthetic appreciation. This was identification of membership in units that operated beyond the boundaries of conventional military structure, conducting missions essential to national security but invisible to public knowledge. The first person to break the silence was Thorne, his voice carrying the careful respect that military personnel reserve for situations involving classified information that exceeded their clearance to fully understand. "Evans, that insignia represents Operation Silent Night, doesn't it?" Willow's eyes tracked to Thorne with the kind of careful assessment that suggested she was evaluating how much he knew about operations that officially didn't exist. Her response would need to balance acknowledgement of his recognition with protection of information that remained classified despite the exposure of her tattoo. "Sir," Willow replied, her voice maintaining the measured professionalism that had characterized all her responses throughout the confrontation, "that information requires security verification before it can be discussed in this setting." But Thorne's recognition had triggered understanding among other instructors whose experience included briefings about special operations that were referenced but never detailed in conventional military planning sessions. The Iron Wolf represented participation in missions legendary within classified military circles, operations whispered about in secure briefing rooms but never discussed in official documentation. Stone stepped forward with authority that came from senior rank and extensive experience with classified operations that most military personnel would never encounter throughout their entire careers. "Captain Sullivan," she said, her voice carrying respectful but firm disagreement with his handling of the situation, "this soldier's background involves security classifications that exceed the scope of routine personnel evaluation." Sullivan found himself facing circumstances that challenged every assumption he had made about his authority over the soldiers assigned to his training program. Willow wasn't just a mysterious recruit whose background requires clarification. She was an operative whose service record involved missions essential to national security but invisible to conventional military structure. The implications were staggering. For 5 weeks, he had been attempting to assert disciplinary authority over someone whose military experience included operations essential to national security but invisible to conventional military structure. His aggressive approach to resolving questions about her background had forced exposure of classified information designed to remain hidden for legitimate security reasons. Phillips, Carter, and Vance stood at the edge of the platform with expressions that reflected their growing understanding that they had been working alongside someone whose capabilities exceeded anything they had imagined possible. The tactical expertise Willow had demonstrated during the exercise wasn't the result of exceptional conventional training. It was the product of participation in real-world operations that had tested her abilities under conditions where failure meant death. Willow could sense the shift in energy across the training field as word began to spread among the assembled soldiers that something extraordinary was happening on the evaluation platform. Conversations died as more personnel turned their attention toward the confrontation that had evolved from routine discipline into recognition of classified military capability. Her teammates looked at her with new understanding that transformed their previous hostility into something approaching awe. Phillips, who had challenged her tactical knowledge during planning sessions, now recognized that his criticism had been directed towards someone whose expertise exceeded his own by margins he couldn't begin to calculate. Carter's nervous energy had evolved into respectful curiosity about the true nature of Willow's military background, while Vance studied her with the professional assessment skills that came from recognizing communication patterns characteristic of special operations rather than conventional military service. Sullivan realized that his confrontation with Willow had escalated beyond his authority to manage effectively. The revelation of her classified background created responsibilities that exceeded his administrative role, while potentially exposing information that required security protocols he wasn't qualified to implement. Willow stood at the center of the platform with the calm bearing that had characterized her presence since arriving at Fort Meridian. But internally, she was calculating the consequences of exposure that would inevitably lead to questions about Operation Silent Night and the 11 operatives who hadn't returned from missions that officially never occurred. Her careful anonymity had been shattered by Sullivan's aggressive approach to demonstrating authority, and the protective silence she had maintained for 3 years was about to be replaced by scrutiny that would reach the highest levels of military command. The approaching sound of vehicles drew everyone's attention toward the base's administrative complex, where official cars were moving with the kind of purposeful speed that indicated emergency response to developing situations. Radio communications crackled across multiple frequencies as word of the situation reached command levels that possessed authority to address circumstances involving classified operations and personnel whose service records required special handling procedures. Willow recognized the signs of official intervention that would either provide protection for classified information or expose details about missions designed to remain hidden from public knowledge. The storm that had been building since her arrival at Fort Meridian was about to be met by forces that operated at levels of authority exceeding anything the people witnessing her exposure could imagine. What happened next would determine whether the truth about Operation Silent Night remained contained within security protocols designed to protect national interests, or whether the most classified military operation in recent history would be exposed to investigation that could compromise ongoing missions and endanger personnel whose survival depended on maintaining operational secrecy. The quiet soldier who had been dismissed as weak and antisocial was about to become the center of attention from military commanders whose decisions shaped national security policy. And the consequences would extend far beyond the routine training evaluation Sullivan had planned to demonstrate his authority over a recruit whose presence had made him uncomfortable. The weeks that followed General Daniel Sterling's intervention at Fort Meridian unfolded with the swift precision that characterized military justice when security protocols had been compromised through leadership failure. Captain Jake Sullivan found himself facing a court-martial inquiry that examined not just his inappropriate order to expose Willow Evans's tattoo, but his complete failure to recognize the authority and classification level of a Pentagon-level operative whose presence at the base served purposes that exceeded his clearance to understand. The inquiry board that convened to review Sullivan's conduct included officers whose experience with classified operations allowed them to assess the full scope of his security violations. Their conclusions were unambiguous. Sullivan's aggressive pursuit of disciplinary action against Willow had compromised operational security through reckless disregard for protocols designed to protect both individual operatives and ongoing mission effectiveness. His military career was effectively terminated within 72 hours of General Sterling's arrival. Sergeant Grace Miller discovered that her campaign to document Willow's problematic behavior had been recorded in multiple formats that reached her commanding officers with devastating clarity. Video footage of Miller publicly mocking a classified operative whose service record included missions essential to national security created consequences that extended beyond simple disciplinary action into permanent reassignment to positions where her judgment could cause minimal damage to military effectiveness. Corporal Nathan Phillips learned that his physical confrontation with Willow during the tactical exercise had involved assaulting an Operation Silent Night operative whose authority superseded normal military hierarchy. The incident was documented as assault on superior personnel, carrying criminal charges that would follow him throughout civilian life while ending any possibility of military advancement or honorable discharge. Private Liam Carter's aggressive questioning of Willow's credentials was reviewed as harassment of classified personnel, resulting in immediate discharge from advanced training programs and reassignment to positions that would never again provide access to operations involving national security considerations. His military career was reduced to routine administrative duties that reflected his demonstrated inability to recognize competence when it was concealed beneath unassuming appearances. But the most significant transformation occurred in Willow herself. General Sterling's intervention provided her with opportunities to channel her grief over Operation Silent Night into constructive change that could prevent similar losses in the future. The exposure of her background had ended the protective anonymity she had maintained for 3 years, but it also opened pathways for applying her expertise in ways that could save lives while honoring the memory of the 11 operatives who hadn't returned from missions that officially never occurred. Within a month of the confrontation at Fort Meridian, Willow was appointed as Director of Advanced Tactical Training, a position created specifically to incorporate lessons learned from classified operations into conventional military instruction. Her office at the Pentagon carried authority that allowed her to reshape training protocols across all branches of the military, ensuring that future operatives would benefit from tactical knowledge that had been purchased through sacrifice and survival during missions where failure meant death. Willow's first initiative involved complete revision of urban warfare training scenarios, replacing theoretical exercises with realistic simulations based on actual combat conditions that special operations personnel encountered during classified missions. The sanitized training programs that had dominated military instruction were replaced with challenging scenarios that tested decision-making under pressure while preparing soldiers for the kind of tactical complexities that could only be understood through real-world experience. Her influence extended beyond tactical training into cultural transformation that addressed the prejudices and assumptions that had characterized her treatment at Fort Meridian. Willow implemented evaluation systems that prioritized practical competence over theoretical knowledge, while establishing protocols that recognized capability regardless of how it was packaged or presented. The casual dismissal of quiet competence that had marked her early weeks at the base was replaced by institutional awareness that true strength often remained concealed until circumstances required its revelation. The Iron Wolf tattoo that had ended her anonymity became a symbol of hidden expertise throughout military culture, representing the principle that appearances could be fatally deceiving when assessing capability or threat levels. Training facilities across all branches of the military adopted Willow's core doctrine: never underestimate someone based on surface characteristics, because the most dangerous operatives were often those who appeared least threatening until the moment they chose to demonstrate their true capabilities. 5 years after the confrontation at Fort Meridian, Willow stood before a congressional committee presenting her annual report on military training effectiveness. The statistics were impressive. Casualty rates during special operations had decreased by 40%. Mission success rates had improved by 50%, and a new generation of military leaders had emerged who understood that competence came in many forms that weren't always immediately recognizable. But beyond the numbers lay a cultural transformation that extended throughout the military establishment. The institution that had once dismissed Willow as weak and unsuitable had learned to recognize that quiet observers might possess the most valuable tactical knowledge. that mysterious backgrounds often concealed essential expertise, and that the soldiers who seemed least impressive might be precisely the ones whose capabilities exceeded conventional understanding. Willow's office overlooked the Pentagon courtyard, where thousands of military personnel moved through their daily routines, most of them unaware that their training protocols had been shaped by lessons learned during missions that remained classified beyond their clearance to access. The framed photograph on her desk showed 12 operatives in combat gear, taken the night before Operation Silent Night commenced, 11 faces that would never age. Beyond that moment, and Willow herself, the sole survivor whose guilt had been transformed into purpose that honored their sacrifice while protecting others from similar losses. A knock on her door interrupted thoughts that still returned to that desert night when everything changed. "Come in," she called, recognizing the weight of responsibility that came with each new assignment that required her expertise. A young colonel entered, carrying folders marked with the highest security classifications. "Ma'am, we've received a request from Joint Chiefs. They need your assessment of training protocols for a new classified operation. Timeline is 48 hours. Willow accepted the folders with the same calm professionalism that had characterized her response to challenges since the day her anonymity was shattered at Fort Meridian. Each new assignment carried the potential to prevent losses that families would never have to endure. Tactical knowledge that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. As the colonel departed, Willow opened the first folder and began reviewing mission parameters that would test new operatives under conditions similar to those that had claimed 11 lives during Operation Silent Night. But this time, those operatives would benefit from training protocols that incorporated hard-won lessons about tactical adaptation, strategic thinking, and the kind of innovative problem-solving that could only be taught by someone who had survived when survival seemed impossible. The quiet woman who had been publicly humiliated for not looking like a soldier had become the architect of military doctrine that shaped how the most powerful armed forces in the world identified, developed, and deployed specialized capability. Her transformation from dismissed recruit to Pentagon-level authority represented more than personal vindication. It embodied institutional evolution that recognized strength in forms that had previously been overlooked or undervalued. The tattoo on her back remained hidden beneath her uniform, but its meaning had spread throughout military culture as a reminder that true competence didn't announce itself through aggressive display. It waited, observed, and demonstrated precision when circumstances required capabilities that exceeded normal expectations. Willow Evans had learned that lesson in the harsh desert of Arizona, where prejudice and assumption had been stripped away to reveal expertise that changed everything. The military had learned it too, becoming stronger and more effective through recognition that appearances could be fatally deceiving, and that the most valuable operatives were often those who earned the right to exceptional capability, whether anyone recognized them or not. And so, the quiet soldier who defied expectations became the architect of a new era. Willow Evans's journey from a misunderstood recruit to a Pentagon-level authority reminds us that true strength often lies hidden, waiting for the moment to reveal itself. It's a testament to the fact that competence transcends appearances, and that the most profound lessons are sometimes learned in the harshest ways. Her story, etched in silence and marked by the Iron Wolf, changed not only her destiny but the very fabric of military doctrine. If Willow's unwavering resolve and the uncovering of her extraordinary secret resonated with you, we encourage you to join the veteran biker community. Your support fuels more stories like this one, tales of resilience, hidden heroes, and the profound impact of individual courage. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of Willow's journey struck you the most? Share your insights in the comments below, and don't stop here. We've saved something extra special for you. Right now on your screen, 2 more standout stories are waiting. Just click and discover new adventures. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another upload from Veteran Biker. Thank you for watching.